So I'll repeat myself. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are here to talk about our grant that we received in October of 2022 for expanding community colleges as SNAP employment and training providers. It was a grant that is one of several national partnership grants. We are actually participating in one currently, and this new round that was that we received is specific to community colleges. So I want to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can start going through our presentation. So that's not what I wanted. So can everyone, is that in presentation mode? Let me see what I'm sharing. Yes. Okay. So if everyone can see that, we'll go ahead and get started. And so there was a question in the chat, and yes, the answer is if you did submit an application in December, you can resubmit. So thank you for that question, Patrick. Okay. So as I mentioned before, my name is sjurch. I am the director of the Center for Policy and Practice here at the Association of Community College Trustees. I'm joined by my colleague, Linda Rhodes, who is our senior project associate. So Linda started yesterday. So I think that she wins the record for being thrown right into the fire on day 2, the quickest of any. I joined the organization almost a year ago, so I'm relatively new myself. I was at a community college prior to this. So, so Linda will be heading this project up, but I've been working on it since October, since we received the grant. And so I'm going to take you through several different things. We have an agenda for today. So what I want to talk a little bit about is the project overview. Sort of, if you're new to SNAP E&T, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with SNAP E&T itself. Talk a little bit about the partners that are participating in this project. Talk about the eligibility to be a participant in this project. Talk a little bit about what Food and Nutrition Services is actually looking for as far as project outcomes or project objectives. It's very different than some other grants that I've been a part of as far as deliverables go. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about our project design. Talk about how we're going to select the institutions, talk a little bit about what's going to be, I guess, what the institutions and the systems are going to do during the project. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the application questions and maybe give you some insight on what we're looking for or why we may have asked that question in the first place. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers for anyone who, may need some additional information. So. Just admitting somebody. Okay, so the project overview. So SNAP Employment and Training is a federally funded program. And so all the states are required to run a SNAP E&T program, and there's about $300 million that is divided up amongst the states to design and operate their program. And that funding goes into one of 3 buckets. So there's 100% funds, which are used for administrative costs. So the programs are the designated agency at each state is the Health and Human Services Agency within the state. And that's obviously, they have a lot of different titles, but they are the agency that's in charge of carrying this program out. So they get 100% funds from the government in order to set it up and administer this program. And there's a variety of partners that they can utilize to help carry that out, which is what we're talking about today. So there's another type of funding stream that's called 50-50 funds. And that is where, that is sort of the meat and potatoes of this project. And it's a way to utilize these 50-50 funds to help reimburse third-party partners for providing services. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's a category called pledge funds, and those are earmarked for a specific population. I'm not going to get too much into that. We do have quite a bit of information on our website around SNAP E&T as a program. So if you're interested in that, there's information there. So SNAP E&T covers what they call eligible activities. And so these range from training costs, so tuition and fee costs, career navigation, case management, job development, books, equipment, tuition, I already said, uniforms, supplies for courses, transportation, and childcare. So these are a lot of these services institutions are already providing, and this particular program allows the way for those services that you're already providing to be reimbursed at that 50% level, which I mentioned earlier. So that's sort of I'm not even going to say 30,000 because it was even broader than that. I'm going to say 100,000-foot view of what SNAP employment and training is. And so what we have done is brought on a couple of partners, which are Seattle Jobs Initiative, which is our technical assistance advisors, and they are well known in the SNAP E&T world. They are involved in just about every project that the federal government funds for these types of initiatives. So they are experts and they're based out of Seattle. And so they will be providing the direct technical assistance for any participants in this project. And then we are partnering with the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA. And what they are, who they are the organization that they're an association, and their membership are all of those state health and human services agencies that I mentioned before. So they are the direct connection to the state agencies that are tasked with carrying out this SNAP E&T program. So they are, that they'll serve as that direct liaison with the states, and they can help facilitate some different things like that. So we have a very strong coalition of partners. And then there's going to be what we're calling a third party partner as part of this project. And each institution is going to have that third party. It's going to be customized to exactly what that institution needs. And so we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about how the project is structured. So I think the biggest thing around eligibility is that all the participants have to be members of ACCT. Now, if you're not a current member, your institution or your system is not a current member, then we encourage you to become a member in order to participate in this project. The other eligibility issue is you cannot be a current SNAP E&T third-party partner or provider. So if you're an institution that is already providing SNAP E&T services and you're just looking to grow your program, this is not this project is not designed for that type of institution. We're looking for brand new providers. And then our two focus areas are rural institutions and state systems or associations. And so if you are an institution and you are designated rural based on one of the federal definitions, and on our website, there is actually a sort of a cheat sheet on the 5, we've picked 5, and I think there's more, the 5 definitions that the main federal agencies utilize. And so if you qualify as a rural institution or rural serving institution based on that, then then you'd be eligible. All right, so that's a little bit about the project overview from a content perspective. And so when we look at what USDA is looking for around SNAP employment and training, their primary objective with this project is to expand the number of skill-based, employer-driven SNAP E&T community college providers. That essentially the purpose of SNAP is to move someone towards economic self-sufficiency. So they want more community colleges to be able to provide SNAP E&T programs on their campuses. So we're gonna do that through a couple different things. We're gonna create some new capacity to provide technical assistance. So we are going to provide things like conferences and meetings. We talked about the technical assistance materials. We talked about developing peer-to-peer learning networks, so all of these through our partners, SJI and APHSA. We're also going to promote best practices. So we are going to give the participants of this project all of the tools that they need to become a partner or a provider for SNAP employment and training services. So that is the primary objective of this project. And, part of the other objectives are to, disseminate this information to individuals that aren't going to participate, but then they could utilize that information to pursue this on their own. So it's very different, and these are the deliverables of the project. So it's very different than other grant projects that you may have been a part of. This is, their goal is to just get more people to do this. They do not put, numbers on that. So it's just a matter of taking our cohort and walking them through the process, and hopefully everyone in the cohort will become a provider. But if they're not, that's okay. All right. So let me move to the next section. I'm just making sure there's no other people being admitted. All right, so a little bit about the project design. So how are we actually carrying out these objectives that FNS is looking for? And so the first thing is we are going to run, there's going to be 2 cohorts. This is a 3-year project. So we are going to run 2 cohorts. I mentioned earlier, our focus is rural institutions and state systems and/or associations. So we're recruiting. Our current application is open for our current cohort. So we are hoping to select 5 rural institutions and 2 systems or associations. And those systems or associations would be asked to bring 3 of their colleges that are within their systems as pilot institutions. I'll talk a little bit about sort of the structure around the system here in just a minute. So that would be, one cohort is 5 institutions and 2 systems, and then the second cohort will be the same. So it's a smaller project, but we felt like the amount of time and effort that goes in, we want the colleges to be successful. So we are going to spend a lot of time with each institution. So I think what we've learned from our current project is that we want to do some real intensive work to make sure and essentially walk the institution step by step through the process, and that is time consuming. So we needed to limit the number of institutions that are participating. So in order to help with staff time primarily, each institution that's selected will get a stipend. So the individual institutions will get $7,500. The state systems or associations will get $14,000 to participate, and that's to offset, internal costs. There's some travel that's may or may not be some travel that's part of this project, but that is not covered under the stipend. That's covered additionally. So we have travel budget as well. I mentioned that we currently, our application is live currently. The deadline is January 27th. And all of it's electronic. All the links are on the webpage. And I can put that in the chat as well. I just realized I don't actually have the website link embedded in this presentation, but I'll put it up in the chat, and I'll send it out with the recording as well. So so that will, the institutions, the deadline's the 27th, and we hope to have the institutions selected by the following week. So okay, so the next piece, once the institutions are selected, we are going to ask them to perform a self-assessment. And basically, this is to determine the readiness to participate. We said it's, it's an involved process. So we wanted to make sure, that each institution understands what is needed or necessary to participate in the in this project or to become a successful provider. And so it's just looking internally at your institution at a variety of different things. Once we determine that, and that will also help us determine that third partner I mentioned earlier, to say, you know, maybe an institution has difficulty with, I'm not sure, financial aid, determining how, you know, some federal, non-federal funding can be acquired. So we might bring in a financial aid advisor or another college that has been successful in that as a mentor to that institution. So each institution's, you know, gap in their readiness will be sort of, that's where we will find that third partner. So we want to really customize it to the institution. There was a question in the chat talking about travel. So no, the institution is not responsible for the travel. That is basically ACCT will cover the travel costs if there are any. That stipend is primarily for staff time. So, okay. So that was our self-assessment piece. So once we have all of the you know, necessary information around what the college, you know, has, or where the gaps might be, we'll move into the education and implementation. So this is where, you know, there's a lot of foundational information around SNAP employment and training. There is very specific, facilitated discussions with our technical assistance providers, and that's going to be per institution. So each institution will have its own sort of what we'll call, you know, prep meetings. So we'll have a series of, you know, sessions, and we want all of the people at the college that are going to be part of this project, or as many as possible, to be part of those conversations, everywhere from the, you know, the program side of the college, the financial aid and business office part of the college, the advising, if that's appropriate, part of the college. We want people that are going to be involved in this process hearing the same message, because we've learned that in, you know, we want all the people to hear the same thing. It just works the best. And so that's going to be part of it. And the idea is all of those meetings are going to prepare the institution for a site visit. So we're sending a site team to your campus that's going to consist of Linda and someone from Seattle Jobs Initiative, and then that third partner, whoever that is. And there's going to be basically a day and a half-ish workshop to essentially say, okay, we're ready to, you know, become a provider. Let's finalize the application process, or let's finalize our work plan so we can then apply to become a third-party partner. So instead of bringing the institutions to a central location and doing it all as a group, we're going to go out to your campuses. So it's easier for the campus to bring all of those people that need to be part of this to the table, versus trying to organize everyone to come to a different location. So we also found that is a more successful approach. So once the site visit occurs, that will hopefully be the catalyst to apply to the state to become part of the state plan and become a third-party partner. And then for the rest of the project, there's going to be ongoing technical assistance, which is essentially helping you over the road bumps that are going to happen as a brand new provider. But then also, you know, the technical assistance during the implementation piece is going to be much more robust. But the technical assistance after the site visit occurs is going to be more what we call that office hour approach, where you have a resource if you need it, but at the same time, there's no like heavy time commitment or anything like that. So, and that's sort of, that is essentially the basis of how the project is set up. Now, obviously it's going to be more complicated than those 4 steps, but that sort of gives you an idea of what you might be in for if you participate. And again, I can take questions at the end, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone has that information. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was application review. In other words, I just want to go over some of these questions that are on the application itself and give you a little bit of insight to why we're asking those. So I think the biggest thing that we're looking for, some of the narrative or what is it, free type questions are, why do you want to participate? Why do you want to become a SNAP third-party partner? And then how do you think your students are going to benefit? I mean, that is the goal of this project, is to benefit our students. And so we want to make sure that, we want to see that you're invested in, that student benefit, which I know we all are, but, we want to see that is in line with the, mission of the institution and so on and so forth. There's a few questions around different types of demographic data that your institution might track. Do you target specific student populations? If you do, and how you assess barriers to incoming students? Those are questions that are going to be asked because we're trying to figure out how well positioned institutions are to recruit students. So a lot of your students are currently eligible for SNAP right now on your campuses, and you may or may not know who those students are. And so by tracking or having access to this type of data, you might be better able to recruit those students. So that's why we're asking those questions. There's some questions on what workforce programs you offer, and any workforce services or supportive services, all of those things that would be classified in that wraparound services, career navigation, job development, case management, those types of things. And we've asked those questions because we want to understand what your capacity is for providing those eligible activities that I mentioned at the very beginning, around what SNAP E&T can actually cover. And so those don't have to be provided by you on campus. And I think that's an important thing to understand, is a lot of institutions have existing partnership with various community-based organizations that may provide some of these services. So it's okay if the services aren't located on your campus, but it'd be good to know, how your partnerships are structured, who are you partnering with, that sort of stuff, to help us understand, what infrastructure you have in place already. So what we have seen, one of the biggest, I guess, hurdles for institutions is non-federal funding identification. And so let me explain a little bit about that. The way the 50-50 reimbursement works for SNAP E&T is, and I'll just use a very simple example. If you have a student who is on SNAP benefits, they are eligible for SNAP E&T, and you have a training program that costs $5,000. The institution has to be able to come up with $5,000 to pay for that student's tuition and fees. But if they are a SNAP E&T participant, the institution can then be reimbursed $2,500 for that tuition and fees. But the caveat is that $5,000 has to be non-federal. So you have to be able to identify sources such as private foundations, state workforce money. There's a lot of different buckets that we can help you identify that you may not be aware of or may not view as a non-federal source. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that type of upfront funding, and then you get reimbursed 50% of that. Now, that is not just for tuition and fees. So if you have a staff person that is working with SNAP E&T students, the time spent working with those SNAP E&T students is reimbursable at 50%. So if you have, the easiest example is if you have a full-time case manager that works with nothing but SNAP students, their salary is reimbursable at 50%. So it's and it gets better. Those reimbursable, that 50-50 money, there's no cap on it. It's unlimited. So you can do a lot with that. The other thing is the money that comes back from the federal government in form of a reimbursement can be reinvested. Ideally, it's reinvested in those particular students, but it can be reinvested in the institution for additional infrastructure, for a variety of different things. It does not, it loses all of its federal, classification, and can be just, it's money back to the college to offset expenses. But you have to be able to front that money in a non-federal way. So that is a challenge. So just put your thinking caps on around how you identify, or if you, and the other thing is, it doesn't have to be a huge amount. You could start with, a very small program. What we've also learned is that starting small is probably better, to work out all the bugs, to put your systems in place, and then grow from there. And it could be 10 students a year. I mean, it could be that, small to start, which helps, a lot of times when you're talking about these large programs, it becomes overwhelming to think about, oh, I'm going to, I have 60,000 students. How am I going to do this? Start small. So the last piece is departmental awareness. I put this on there because what we've also found is we may be talking to the workforce person at an institution, and they are, 100% behind this. They're ready to start, but the financial aid office doesn't know anything about it. The advising office doesn't know anything about it. Some other pieces of that puzzle. We want to make sure everyone that's going to be involved understands, or at least is aware that you're pursuing this opportunity, to make sure everyone's on board, because it just makes for an easier and more successful program. So that's why we asked that. There's a question around, does everyone know what you're doing? So, all right, let me see if there's something else I wanted to ask. So for the state, the application is a little different for the state systems and associations because they represent multiple institutions. So one of the questions is, and it goes back to the non-federal funding identification, is, if you're aware of any of your institutions within the system that, has done that before, or has the ability to identify non-federal funds. And obviously you would prioritize the institutions that you were thinking about bringing in as pilots. Okay, so in summary, basically we've talked about sort of the project overview, where we're coming from, what SNAP E&T is, who our partners in this project are going to be, some eligibility issues. We've talked about what the USDA is looking for around project objectives. We've talked a little bit about the design. I know it's very high level stuff. And we've talked a little bit about sort of the background and why we're asking some of the questions on the application. But now I would like to open it up to questions if anyone has any. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone. And then feel free to raise your hand, or we'll put up your emoji or whatever it is if you have questions. I'm happy to answer. If you don't have questions, that's fine too. I just wanted to give everyone the opportunity to clarify anything that they needed. Yes, Laura.
I appreciate this. This was very helpful, but I just had a couple of questions.
Sure.
When thinking about this, and we haven't had a chance to go to our local job and family services to kind of get their feedback on providing from our site, but do you anticipate it's challenging once you go through the process to be approved, Or is it once we've done all this work, you think that most of the states will be willing to approve applications?
So are you, what state are you in?
Ohio?
Okay, so Ohio, no, Ohio is one of the states that we actually have some colleges that are currently in our current cohort. So the state is on board. So I don't think if you were to, go through all the steps and then want to apply, I think the state is on board in Ohio.
Okay.
I would check with, yeah, I'm trying to think if you need to check with the association. Because you have there's several colleges that are already providers in Ohio, from my understanding. So I think that's a good, so yes, so the state would be open to it. And as far as I know, they're actually open to adding additional institutions.
Okay.
I think sometimes the state's open to partners, but they've never partnered with a college before. But I do know Ohio has partnered with colleges before.
Great. And then one additional question, when you were talking about 50-50,
Yes.
Covering 50% of a staff member who's working with SNAP students.
Yes.
Is there a limit then that it can only be used if they're fully focused on SNAP students? Because we have like someone who I would describe as case management, but she likely is also with non-SNAP.
So yeah, so what you would do is you would basically have to estimate the time spent on those particular and then be reimbursed based on that percentage. So that's a great question. And that is a good way to start on things as well. So like when I talked about 10 students, the reason community colleges are ideal for this type of program is because you're already doing a lot of that stuff. The challenging part is being able to say, well, I spent 30 minutes with this, 30 minutes with this student who's a SNAP recipient and 10 with this one and an hour with this one, and sort of piecing it all together and then submitting that time for reimbursement. That's the logistical challenges that occur, but I do think it's worth it because you can then take that money, reinvest it, and eventually hire full-time staff that are only dedicated to that. So it's sort of like this snowball effect.
Sure. And the interesting thing with this person I'm thinking of is that she's actually not our employee. She's part of a community organization that we buy shares of her time.
Okay.
Other institutions that are employers, not higher ed.
Right.
So we do buy shares of her time, but I'm just targeted her in my mind because I'm like, that'd be a great way to support what she's doing.
Exactly. Yep.
With the funds. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Patrick, you had your hand up.
Okay, two questions. One, in the beginning, you gave us the number of institutions that you would be working with. I failed to write that number down. If you could repeat that.
Sure. So we're going to run 2 cohorts. Each cohort is going to consist of 5 rural institutions and 2 state systems or associations. And those associations are going to be asked to bring on 3 colleges, 2 to 3 colleges as pilots within their system.
Okay, great. And then the second question, this is the one I've been working with people trying to learn the program, submitted an application, I'm going to redo it. Is from a business standpoint, why would we want to offer our service basically at 50% of what we would normally get?
I'm not sure I follow the question, but let me see if I can answer it. So basically, you're not reducing the services that you're providing. You're still providing the service, but you're then being reimbursed for 50% of the cost to administer that service.
So they use Pell Grant to pay the tuition for, they wanted a degree program or a certificate program. Right. Are we able to take 50% on that? That's federal money.
Not on Pell, but here's what you can do. That's a very good question. So if a student, and this is another, I guess, challenge of this program, is you're braiding a lot of funding streams. So if, for instance, if a student is using Pell to pay tuition and fees, we'll just keep it simple for right now. So if that's what they're using Pell money for, they can use SNAP E&T money to pay for books, for uniforms, for equipment, other things that Pell is not paying for. excuse me for one second, that Pell is not paying for. So it's a good way to supplement financial aid that they are receiving. You just couldn't get reimbursed of that 50% of that Pell.
Okay, so there you just used one of the examples I was asked.
Okay.
We buy the books for the student, and then we're only getting 50% of the cost of that. So we just lost 50%. Where if we had made them buy the book, we would have gotten 100%.
Yes, you would have, but I guess the other side of that is if you're already buying the students' books anyway as part of the program, then you're offsetting the cost that the college has to spend.
Okay, so
I'm
in
not
our
sure.
case, we're not for most of the programs. So that's not an example then.
Oh, okay. I'm happy if we want to set a conversation up offline, that might be easier. But I'm happy to answer additional questions, like if we want to have a conversation around like some more specifics that you can use as examples.
Okay, I may be contacting you.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, well, I had one other. I will put up. So I will put up, this is my contact information and also Linda's contact information. So if you have questions, let me do this. Let me put in the link in the chat to our website that has all the information. Okay, sorry, I'm looking off camera. All right, so that is the link to the website that has the links to the application, has more about the project, has the information around the qualifying as a rural institution, and some other different things. But then again, this will be, I recorded this, so we will put this recording up on the website. I will email it to everyone that was here, plus those that registered that were not able to come. But do not hesitate if you have questions, if you're like, yes, we want to do this, but you know, I need to get approval and someone's out of town, so I may miss the deadline. Let's talk. Okay, we want this project to be a success. So if you have questions or you know, don't think you qualify and want to be sure, you know, feel free to reach out. So that's what we're here for. But I do want to thank everyone for their time, and hopefully this was helpful. And I will give you a few minutes back in your day, which is always nice. So I'm going to stop the recording.